This is Adam Simbe with This Week in Perspective. Today I have four gentlemen here whom I invited, and they willingly accepted to participate in the discussion today. And the discussion was basically going to focus on the Kenyan political and election impasse or situation. But I think the idea was taken by events, and therefore we'll discuss the Kenyan situation and then quickly move on to the latest development in Zimbabwe, our southern neighbor. So the Kenyan situation is definitely as important as one would expect, because the second poll on the 26th of October did not end conclusively. And of course, we know that it was boycotted by Raila Odinga, and therefore it was a one-man show. And the facts are there that the turnout, the voter turnout was very low. I mean, at 39%. And eventually, of course, Uhuru was declared the winner by 98%. So there are a number of issues pending, and hence the Supreme Court again has received appeals and is now considering these appeals. We don't know what the final verdict will be, and we don't intend to prod into that because the matter is in court. We shouldn't be in a situation of sub judice. Therefore, my panelists here are Deo Balileo, managing editor of Jamhuri Weekly News Magazine, which is becoming very popular these days. Former Deputy Minister, and I call him a seasoned politician, Sinjelo Kasaka, a very well-known political scientist, probably University of Dar es Salaam, but then he went on to St. Augustine. I don't know whether he's still St. Augustine, but
I'm still around.
He's still around. I always want him to come help us analyze the political issues. Then, last but not least, Joseph Mwamnyange. Again, he used to be with the several newspapers, but the last, which was for a while, was the East African. But I hear he's no longer there, so he has become a media consultant. Well, the four gentlemen will try and help us understand the situation in Kenya and where Kenya is going and what will happen. So thank you very much for your participation. Professor Baregu, was the repeat poll in Kenya on October 26 transparent, free, and fair, as well as credible?
Maybe I should begin with our last discussion on this topic when we discussed the elections in Kenya.
September.
Yeah,
yes.
The first round of elections. And we discussed that after the Supreme Court decision nullifying the last election. And when we are discussing this issue, I think basically two critical issues really emerged. One was what were the points of contention? I think we agreed that on the one hand, we have those who said the numbers were right, who concentrated on the numbers. Okay, there were ballot boxes, they should have recounted the number of the ballot papers, etc., etc. There are those who insisted on the constitutional provisions. In other words, did the election meet all the constitutional and legal requirements to be considered a free, fair, and credible election? And I recall I said, well, I think the IEBC had failed basically to pass the credibility test that the election could not be verified, and therefore it could declare that result. And I remember we were with Professor Mukangara here. Mukangara was much more on the legal side, that in fact there is really no problem with the provisions and the Constitution. Let's go for the numbers. What I suspect now, this time around, is probably we may find ourselves on the same kind of terrain, basically discussing whether or not, and I think there are already submissions in court now, which seem to suggest that, again, we are going to have a problem with the numbers in terms of who voted, who did not, who was disenfranchised, who was not. And then we're also going to have a problem probably with the law itself, because somebody has already said, well, the IEBC had a responsibility to order new nominations, because if you order a new election, that means it's an election right from the word go. You repeat the whole process. And if, depending on what really comes out of this, they might be able to dismiss the numbers thing, but can they dismiss also this whole question of whether or not the legal and constitutional requirements were met? We cannot sit here and begin to anticipate, as you said. I think the thing is now in court. But I think you'll begin to see some of the contours of what the outcomes might be. And I just hope that everybody will remember all the time that elections, at the end of the day, they are neither about numbers, nor about laws and the constitutions. They are about politics. At the end of the day, Kenya will need some kind of political stability. If it means they're going to have to compromise on some issues, well, compromise is the name of politics. That is, politics is not the art of the feasible. It's the art of the desirable. It is the feasible. That which is possible can only be decided by politics. So I hope they are aware that they shouldn't leave themselves in this constitutional numbers fix and then fail to realize that this could precipitate a political crisis beyond numbers and beyond constitutional requirements.
Do you think, very quickly, that the Kenyan population is actually tired and not necessarily fed up with what is going on? Is that what you would say?
Not only that, is it fed up, and I'm not quite sure that they're all fed up at the same rate or at the same extent. But it's also tearing the country apart. And that's why they really want to tread carefully. For example, if you have a whole chunk of the western regions, the counties to the west, almost 5 counties, who, for one reason or the other, whether or not they obstructed the process or whether or not they use their right not to vote, whatever you do. But the point is you have a very large chunk of the country which do not consider themselves part of that results, and therefore they don't buy in the results. And I think that's a bigger challenge for all of them. It doesn't matter whether you're NASA, doesn't matter whether you're Jubilee, to end up with an inclusive Kenya. And compromises are about that. That's what I'm saying. They have to watch themselves very carefully, because otherwise these rifts, people have already started drawing new maps of Kenya. So I hope...
those same counties in the west, I've heard rumors saying they might as well just declare secession.
Declare secession. I mean, when you start, I hear now even some noises from the coast, Mombasa. And Mombasa, they are saying not only are they rediscovering their independence after, you remember the 10-mile strip before Kenya's independence, and now they're saying, and how about Zanzibar? Which also, so there are these things that can reverberate beyond Kenya, and I think it's important to be careful.
Okay, in view of the time, I don't think we should all go back to the same question I asked Professor, but let's move on to something else. And I would like this time to Balile come in, and then we'll get to Honorable Jero Kasaka. With the voter turnout of 39%, and no polling in almost 5 countries, do you think the election of Uhuru by 98% was legitimate?
It is not my role to declare him illegitimate or
legitimate.
or legitimate, but looking at it from its face, I think he has something to think about. Because if you have about 59% of the population who did not turn out to vote, this is a very, very strong message. Whether perceived or real, is a very, very strong message. You don't know what they are thinking about. You don't know what they are planning as their next step. So ignoring them might be creating your own way for distraction. So I think Kenyans, the time has come. They tried it in 2007, 2008. Professor put it rightly here that it's a political game. They should put Kenya first and see what they can do together jointly. In negotiation, there is this element of give and take. Yes. I know, I have heard a number of statements from the deputy president, from the president, that there is no room for negotiation this time for the national coalition government, that Raila should be not even thinking about it. But I can dare to say that soon or later they are going to change these statements. Even if Raila doesn't utter a word or doesn't say, do anything, but this big force of 59%.
They all call him Baba.
That's what I wanted to say, who are calling him Baba.
Yeah.
You should be thinking of them.
Yes.
You should be contemplating that something worst might emerge out of it. And we should not forget the history of what happened in 2007, when similar or like of the same happened. They disputed that election.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, we are seeing, actually they are all saying the language which Loira is saying. They are saying the Electoral Commission had to be restructured before administering this rerun election. They are saying the ballot papers which were used are the old ones. So they wanted new ballot papers printed. They are saying there was a need to make sure that the French company, which was administering the biometric gadgets, had to be eased from that job, that it had to be taken by someone else. So they went into a rerun with the same setup, with the same electoral commission, with the same people whom were declared by the court either incompetent or had intrinsic political inclination, which might have led to the cancellation of the former elections. So there is more to think about it. And Uhuru should not be celebrating, should be starting to think, to strategize how to go about it, how we can bring together the Kenyans to have a unified nation than thinking of showing off, showing power, showing his mighty, and so forth.
Okay. Njelo Kasaka, and I think Joe, you come in with, all of you can now come in, because I think this will be our last question on Kenya. In your view, is Kenya facing a difficult path to reconciliation, stability, and economic progress, as the East African of October 28 and November 3 says?
Yeah, thank you. Kenya right now is going through a difficult period politically. And we as Tanzanians, Kenya being our neighbor, not only a neighbor, but a close neighbor, and the Kenyans are here, our brothers and sisters, we must be concerned to what is happening in Kenya right now. What I can say is that the politicians in Kenya must sit down and think how to move forward without endangering the stability of their country. Right now, they are sitting on a volcano which can erupt any time.
Indeed.
Because the country, from history, is almost balkanized. There are pockets of areas which are disgruntled, and they have been harboring these, I can say, for years. You see, they have misgivings with what is happening in Nairobi. And in fact, as a nation, the western part of the country, they are complaining of being increasingly marginalized right now. This is their complaint. And the people along the coast, they are complaining of being neglected, being, bogged down in poverty, unemployment, and the social neglect generally. And in northern Kenya, where they border with Somalia, the Somalis there they have been always agitating.
Of course.
Yeah, agitating to be left alone. So Kenyan politicians must take into account all these elements, all these issues, before they can sit comfortably and say we have won the election. I come back to what Dale here was saying. President Kenyatta should not only celebrate of having won 98% of the second real vote. No, he should be thinking of uniting the country, putting the country together, and they should not rule out any discussion with the other side, the other parties. Yes. So it is something which we as Tanzanians, we should also help in a way, whatever we can, in whatever way we can, help our friends here in Kenya. They should go through this difficult period safely and peacefully. And in fact, the second rerun, some observers have even said they cannot state that the elections were free and fair. So there is a problem which need to be solved.
Yes.
Actually, Judge Maraga said the rerun.
That's the Chief
Justice. He said the rerun had to be in strict compliance with the constitutional requirements.
Yeah.
But now, if you look at a number of flaws, that statement of strict compliance to the constitutional requirements leaves a lot to desire.
And when you have 26 constituencies did not participate in the rerun vote,
Yes.
that is a big chunk of the voting population.
Yes. Joe, let's hear from you.
It's very interesting. Like Deo was saying, Uhuru is not helping matters. He has continued polarizing the country, he's putting more ember into the fire. Because if you look at what happens in 2007 when there are those riots, it's the conditions for such are always there. And you talked about Tanzania playing a role in trying to help. The last reconciliation, Tanzania played a very big role, if you remember.
Yes.
When President Kikwete had to go there and they resolved that. But we have reached a stage whereby a certain section of Kenyans are calling for a boycott of products made by certain companies. So you see that's going to adversely affect the economy. If they succeed in boycotting these products of the people they think were part and parcel of the Kenyatta machinery.
Yes.
So from an economic point of view, Kenya stands to suffer if this continues, the stalemate continues. And it's about compromise. It's about giving and bending backwards so that you can allow some of the things to go forward. But uttering such statements which are like a strongman statement, if you say that they've been stealing election for the past 4 years, why don't you steal?
Yeah.
And this is a head of state, If it was somebody, for some secretary of some party in a locality, I would agree with that. This is the president, he's the chief executive of a country. He's saying, if you say they're stealing, you go and steal, And you tell Maraga and company that, we win elections and only 6 people decide that we didn't win. Where is the independence of the three?
Call them names.
Yes. Where is the independence of the?
Wakora.
Yes. The 3 sections of governance: legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. Now you are the executive. You're saying you have no right to nullify these elections. Everybody in the region, they say the Kenyans that come up with a very good constitution, they were going to move forward. Everybody was, we even took it up from there that we also need a new constitution. But what is the new constitution doing to them? So it's not necessarily what you have as a constitution. It also matters. The human resource you have to lead the country also matters. Because with the current of politicians that we have, that won by 98% of 39%, But there's a situation that was asked by some political analysts that said, do you call an election where at least 50% haven't taken part as genuine elections and the results should be respected? That should be left for debate. But what is happening in Kenya is, it's ripe enough to go into something else. You remember what happened to Slobodan Milosevic? The revolution was started by students. If you remember that. You remember the Iranian Green Revolution. Yes. So, like Barile said, Kenyatta shouldn't be celebrating. You should be looking at ways of, pacifying act like a father. Even though it's very difficult for him, with his mentality, according to me, his mentality is like, we have won, shut up. That's very wrong.
And we have the divine power to rule us.
That's very wrong.
Yes, Professor.
Yes, I think, I think this point cannot be overemphasized, that there is no need to be triumphalist that they have won. I mean, obviously there is a problem. And I think there is a very serious need for the president to be presidential. I think this must be said, because
that's what I missed.
I mean, it's not
be presidential.
Yeah, it's not just a question of utterances. It's also the question that you are a symbol of national unity, and there is no way you can also be a symbol of sectionalism,
divisive politics,
and be very clearly that way that we will win anyway. Who is we? Because at the end of the day, Kenya is looking for all Kenyans to win by having an election that is accepted and owned, the results of which are owned by every Kenyan. Because if you say, we will win anyway, why didn't you steal last time? We are better thieves than you are. Well, obviously, that's not a presidential kind of statement. So I'm sorry to say this, but I think...
Let's have go at the last question before we move on to Zimbabwe. Yes. No matter what happens to the decision of the Supreme Court this time around, do you all think, where does Kenya go or move from this crisis? Will it emerge as a strong, united, unitary state, and will President Kenyatta, if at all is confirmed, govern a country which is split or not? Quickly, and then we'll go on.
Well, a country which is split, that opens up a whole can of worms, because there is no way you can split a country peacefully. Unless you sit down and negotiate the split. But as much as you can negotiate a split, you can also negotiate staying together, because basically there is more to be said, for more arguments for Kenya staying integral than arguments to say maybe now Kisumu. And once that process starts, because remember, Kenya has a constitution now which tried very much to devolve power to the counties. Then they have about 47 counties. And by the way, in terms of voting, there is also a constitutional requirement that we must obtain certain amounts of votes.
24%.
Yeah, from the
25% from the constituencies.
Yeah, of the constituencies as well. So those are issues which will come out in court. But what I'm saying is that the Kenyans should not, or they should try very much not to contemplate seriously the issue of whether they want to break up the country, because Kenya breaks up, and I can assure you, I can assure Tanzanians, I can assure East Africans, we are all on these issues, we are all sitting on a tinderbox. Nobody can just say it's just Kenya, and then it will end at the border. We have had rumblings in this country where people saying that area is liked better, Ukanda area is much better. These are things which are latent within our African countries because of the nature of how we were created. But if we are aware of that, then the more reason why we should be responsible.
Yeah,
and deal with
I
these issues.
from where they are now, they should move towards unity, stronger unity. And the man to do that is President Kenyatta, because he is already on the seat. He is the president right now. He is the person who can do that. And that can be done by negotiating with the opposing parties, not only depending on what happens in the courts. No, that won't bring unity. Unity will be brought by sitting together on a round table like this one. He discussed with the opposition and agree on how to move forward together. In fact, I remember Raila Odinga proposed at one time that they should be included, they should share the government, running with the government. Yes. And immediately after the second vote, actually, President Kenyatta, mentioned that he welcomed the opposition parties to sit together and talk. Although
he said there is no sumkate.
Except a complete mkate. So at least if he does that, then this country can be still united, can move forward as a single country, and we in the region can at least side with the relief, because with the unstable Kenya, we cannot be comfortable here in Tanzania.
Yeah. How can these African member states assist a fellow member state?
Yeah, we have a chairman of the African community. Yes. You remember, we are members of this African community, and we have the chairman of this African community. And I'm surprised they seem to be still lukewarm. Not coming forward.
Maybe they want the court process to go on.
They wanted to waiting for the court process.
I think I'm just thinking aloud.
But they may come when it is too late.
But we should also be careful not to take sides.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, yes. Not
because there are rumblings again.
Yeah.
The problem is what is happening in Kenya. What is happening in Kenya right now is a common problem to many African countries.
Yes.
When we hold elections, we end up in squabbles, in fighting, in friction.
Never smooth sailing.
Not smooth elections, because people have been addicted to stealing of votes, rigging. It's the statement by the president saying that if we stole, why didn't you? Which means that these people...
You the president, that's Kenyatta.
Yeah, Kenyatta, President Kenyatta. President Kenyatta.
But Kenya may not be alone on this. on this question.
Okay, yeah. So that is, if he says, if we stole, why didn't you do the same? Yeah. Which means these people, before they go to the vote, they had already prepared themselves to steal or to rig the votes. And it is a common problem. We should learn, we in Tanzania should learn what is happening in Kenya to adjust ourselves, to put our house in order.
Yeah, the way I look at it is like the leaders in Kenya should start toning down their language now. Instead of behaving as if the campaign is on, they should now be speaking as leaders, bringing together Kenyans. The President Uhuru, Ruto, and Raila Odinga are the ones who can save Kenya. And as you know, Kenya is our special neighbor, we Tanzanians. Kenya, after United Kingdom, is the second largest investor here in Tanzania. So we have a stake in Kenya. Once Kenya is peaceful and stable, we Tanzanians, we are trading, we are earning our bread through the transactions made between Kenya and Tanzania. So I think these kind of languages of saying there is no half a bread, except the whole loaf of bread, should be put off.
What does that mean, actually? I didn't understand.
Well, it's about the coalition
government. The coalition government, which means
country.
you are sharing, like it happened in 2007, 2008. We had it in Zanzibar, where Maalim Seif was sharing the powers with President Shein. It toned down the situation in Zanzibar, and the same applied in Kenya. We had it in Zimbabwe, where we are going to discuss shortly, between President Mugabe and Morgan Tsvangirai. It worked. And actually, these the national government, coalition of national governments, I think it's a practice done across the world. You go to UK, the ruling party now had to cajole with the other small parties.
Yeah.
You go to
Irish
Israel,
Democratic Party,
you go to Israel, they are doing the same. You go to German, Christian Democratic Party, they did not outrightly win. Yeah. So I think for us, we are being pushed it somewhere. We don't deserve to be there. For some people's interest somewhere there. But I think the solution for Kenya is a question of sharing. Professor, I can see you have something.
No, I just wanted to, this is a very important point you're saying, because I think it has to do with our constitutional arrangements and our voter system. First past the post, winner takes all. That's where our problem lies. But I think even in our own constitutional design, we should begin to think positively about coalition governments.
Yes.
It's not about sharing bread. It's about sharing ideas.
By the way, you were a member of the Warioba Commission.
Yes, yeah.
Did this come up in your
Oh, it came up in the
findings?
discussions, yes. And as you see, we ended up, of course, with recommendations that did not please the powers that be. But one of our weaknesses also was we did not really seriously consider the issue of a coalitional system, as like they have in Germany. It's
Germany,
it's not,
Japan.
yeah, by design.
Yes.
By design. You know, you don't. Somebody picks up 60. Say, for example, last time, Chadema picks up
40%.
40%, the candidate 40%, and the other picks up 58%,
58%.
and the guy with 40% walks home with nothing. They should be able to walk home with 40%.
Very quickly. please.
I think they've been aptly covered. You know, it's just that we need, like leaders in Kenya, to just tone down and have a reconciliatory spirit that
But
they
before
should
you move forward, I just wanted to add one point to what Professor Baregu said here about the coalition governments. Barile mentioned examples in Germany, England, UK,
Israel.
and Israel.
Israel, Italy,
Yeah.
you name it.
The problem we have in Africa is that we see the opposition parties not as our
Partners.
partners, no, our enemies.
All right.
We see them as enemies.
Yes.
And therefore, when they make their, the ruling parties, when they make their policies, they make sure they exclude the opposition completely.
Actually, to add on a little bit, I was in
Joe-
China
Joe
about
was
2 weeks
going
ago.
to work
Yeah,
with you. Finish.
I finished this, which is short. In China, they have 9 political parties. The ruling party is CPC, but the remaining 8 parties are advising the ruling party, and they are giving them some portfolios to manage. So I think we can learn from China.
Some cynics said, those are parties formed by the CPC.
Okay, Joe, quickly.
What is happening in Kenya is very unfortunate. That it all rests on the powers that be, you know.
Yes.
Because if they don't do that, the situation will just go from bad to worse.
Yeah. Oh, okay. On that note, maybe we should just conclude with the topic of Kenya. It's a very interesting analysis of the situation in Kenya. So let us put our fingers crossed and hope that things will get better, not worse. And as you rightly said, they are very important neighbors because of this investment potential in this country. And this historical relationship between Kenya and Tanzania, even before the East African Community was expanded. So let's hope they'll come together, tone down their language, and sit on the table and solve their problems and find a common solution so that Kenya remains a unitary state. Thank you very much on that. Now, maybe quickly we look now at the latest development in Africa. Zimbabwe. Professor,
Yes.
do you think it was time the 93-year-old President Mugabe had to go?
Well, maybe I should say that I spent quite some years in Zimbabwe. I think during one of the most turbulent times between 1998 and 2002. That is the time of the land grab, etc., etc. Yes. And just to respond to your question, I think there was a time, around that time also, there was a process of making a new constitution for Zimbabwe. Unfortunately, when it was put to the referendum, the government lost that process. And I think that's when problems really began for Zimbabwe, because then the lines were drawn between those who rejected the new constitution and those who wanted a new constitution, ZANU-PF. And Mugabe had been said at that time that if he had been able to deliver a new constitution to Zimbabwe in the early 2001, 2003, he would probably have also thought about retiring. But instead, He lost his constitutional thing, and then decided he was not going to hang on for as long
More or
as
less like a permanent.
for as long as it becomes necessary. Now, none of us really knows exactly what the situation is now. In Kiswahili we say hali tete. But I think my thinking about this is that one or two things is happening. One is that it's a self-coup, a coup that is basically internal. If you remember Fujimori in Peru at one time, the government gets tired, loses control, is unable to do anything, and therefore reaches out for an assistance from the armed forces. Now, in this case, that's not surprising because remember, Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF, and even is now composed of ZIPRA and ZANLA forces. And there was always the military wing and the political wing, and it will seem to me that the military wing is unhappy with the political wing, but I don't think they want to go beyond that, more than rectify what has brought this happening. If you look at it and the groups that are aligned with this, you almost see the lines are clear. The people that, the so-called Lacoste group, the crocodile group of the Mnangagwa, who are from the bush, in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, these people met as far back as then. And then you have this new group, the so-called G40, all of whom have little, if any, credentials of the liberation struggle in Zimbabwe. So it looks to me, if that's the way it is going, then Zimbabwe may not be mired in long-term, interminable conflicts. If, on the other hand, you mix other issues here, and in the case of Zimbabwe, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Zimbabwe has been under stress. It's been under sanctions. The likes of Britain, the United States, etc.,
European Union
have been very open about their dislike of Mugabe. So there is also that feeling that is it now that this window, which we may think is about correcting internal difficulties, could it be a window that probably arises from these external hostile interests, which have been hostile to the land reform program in Zimbabwe, and hostile to a government that probably seeks to exert more control on its economy, on its resources, etc. So I think that's, as we follow this evolving situation, I think we should be guided by those two. Is it possible that there is some intervention from other interests, or is it just because there is some internal decay? Because Mugabe has lost it, to say the least, because in the age of his age.
And yet he was going to stand next year.
Yeah, and that I think is, and that's what brings the election thing in Kenya.
Just being propped.
I think he was being propped to stand, and it became progressively clear. I think we know what you call the straw that broke the camel's back came with the dismissal of Mnangagwa. And they thought that was just Mnangagwa. Mnangagwa was the first long-lasting, long-living, I think, Minister of National Security. He was Mugabe's assistant even in Mozambique, planning all these things of sabotage, etc. So he's not a novice.
He's not a nobody.
He's not a nobody. And I think now he's decided to exert his power. And I think Mugabe will probably rest. Somebody was talking about Bogiba.
I talked about Bogiba.
About Bogiba, yeah, the way that Bogiba was sort of
Tunisia?
quietly pushed away into some retirement environment.
He didn't know they are taking him to a safe
and I think
house.
that's why they wanted to separate him from Madame Grace Mugabe, who, in my view, started off very greedy for material positions, but then lately also
She wanted power.
She wanted power. She became power hungry. And I think the armed forces of any country will, if they say their commander-in-chief is captured, so you may look at it as an attempt to rescue Mugabe from being captured by these interests.
And you know, one thing is Zimbabwe.
That's one perspective.
Yeah. In Zimbabwe, it's just that maybe in Africa or the SADC or AU, we don't have a mechanism that would, talk to this leadership. It's like everybody thinks you shouldn't interfere with my own affairs. If you remember the former president, late Mwanawasa, he was the first to talk about Zimbabwe openly. He said the Titanic, Zimbabwe is sinking.
Yeah.
People should do something about it. And and nobody listened. They thought that he was just interfering. Then somebody added the voice to Mwanawasa what he had said. Kama, you remember?
Kama, yeah.
Yeah. Kama said no.
The son, the president.
Yeah, the president.
General.
Yeah, he said no. There's something happening in Zimbabwe. It's not good. We should do something about it. After that, that's when you saw the hyperinflation now. Hyperinflation. You buy $1 million, Zimbabwean dollars, for a tomato. $1 million. And that's why they now had to abandon the Zimbabwean dollar for
altogether
the American dollar. So when we went there for a meeting,
Imperialist money.
the imperialist money. When we went there, after that, we were using American dollars to buy things around. But what I'm saying is, Africa, as even analysts, journalists, politicians, political scientists, I think we should come to a stage whereby the leadership in Africa, should learn to live when it's time to live. Yeah. You remember what Nyerere did?
Yes.
Nyerere was still popular.
Kongatuka.
He was still popular. It's not that he became very unpopular, but he said, no, I think my time has come to live.
He almost became unpopular, but if he had made the mistake of staying longer.
Yeah, that's why I was coming there.
Yes.
Say, no, let me live. And when he left, people had to go to him to get, advice, wisdom from him. Because he left, even right now, the old man, Dr. Kaunda, is living very peacefully, because he lost an election in 91 and aggressively said, no, you guys have won, I'm out. At least we should reach a stage whereby we say, I've won, I've lost, but the losing and the winning should be very transparent. Because we are talking about free and fair elections. What are free and fair elections? It's not just going to cast the ballot. It's about the whole process, registering, nominations, campaigning, up to the day you vote. That free and fair elections.
And the counting.
And the counting itself. Like you say that, the voting doesn't matter. What matters is who is in charge. So you find that you vote and you find you are not getting exactly what you voted for.
I think that was
Real quickly.
I think that was a joke by Stalin. Stalin who said that it doesn't matter what people who cast the votes.
Yes.
It's those who count them.
Yes.
Count
That
them.
will make
Actually, I would say that Africa, we need to transform a little bit. We are facing all these because we lack strong institutions. That's why I was happy with Kenya that the court had emerged to be strong, to prove it is strong, though now they are ridiculing the court. But still, I think Kenya is growing strong and stronger. And at the end of the day, they will emerge victorious, all Kenyans. Now looking at Zimbabwe, I was, but I'm not sure I remain, to be a staunchest supporter of Mugabe's ideologies. The way he was speaking, if you could look at him, he was a kind of directing the Zimbabweans to emancipate them from the economic crisis. He was attaching the Zimbabweans to the principal means of production, land. Because by then, when they are negotiating at the Lancaster House, about 12 million Zimbabweans had no land. And the land, productive land, was in the hands of just about 600 white minorities who were controlling the whole land. So Mugabe, that was a very contentious point in 1980 when they were negotiating at Lancaster House. They cheated him and said, of course, he was looking shabby, thin, because he was coming from the bush. They thought he would have died before 2000 and fixed the clause that after 20 years, then he can restructure if they did not pay the compensation. Now, 20 years happened in 2000 when he started the land redistribution system. I don't know whether he approached it rightly or wrongly, but it was a noble cause to do it. However,
But it's important to remember that it was the war veterans
yes,
who actually forced that move on Mugabe
A kind of they reminded him that
Yeah,
you
they reminded
committed in
him, yes.
1980,
Yeah.
and if you are not doing it,
Even in Como before he died, they
Yes.
called him in and
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
we
yeah.
have a pending question, the land question.
yeah. But all these said, still we need strong institutions to manage the succession plan. Like in U.S. today, Trump wanted to build a wall between U.S. and the Mexico. But I don't see him making it because the institutions are pulling him back, are putting a governor for him. But now Mugabe, this good lady Grace, the former secretary,
How good is he?
typist, yeah? no one managed to govern Grace, and Grace became a monster in Zimbabwe. If she winks about you, you are gone. The way it was emerging. So it looks like if Zimbabwe had strong institutions, Grace would have been informed that a first lady is not a part of the administration. You stay away from the administration procedures. But now she has become an official president of Zimbabwe, and our brother Robert Gabriel Mugabe was growing order as day goes on. So at the end of the day, that's what I wanted to say. She manipulated Mugabe for the last 10 to 15 years. He had been in fight with his colleagues, comrades. There was someone, Dennis Moyo, was being seen as a possible successor, but he was pushed away by Grace. There was someone, Simbarashe, was a close ally of Mugabe, was pushed away. And now,
That was Joyce Mujuru.
Yeah,
Joyce
Mujuru, yes.
Mujuru, the
Yeah.
vice
Vice
president,
president.
was also pushed away. And now, this vice president, Mnangagwa, it troubles me
Mnangagwa.
pronouncing it,
Mnangagwa.
has been
Mnangagwa.
pushed away. And the general said, this purging, if not checked, at the end of the day, we end up purging ourselves. So it needs to be controlled or stopped. And the way I see it, actually I like the general. He had a sweet language, and though they gave a warning that whoever contravenes these directives, and the media in Zimbabwe actually was warned not to report anything about it. I don't know what is happening. Maybe we are seeing half of the picture.
Yeah.
Mugabe is no longer, maybe I'm saying, but he promised to speak to the press this afternoon. I'm not sure he did. Or
If they allow him.
if they allow him. Maybe he might speak in a controlled way. They will tell him what
They'll
to
give them
say
the
and what
script.
not. I'm not sure I can be allowed live.
Should SADC, we have
But he
time is
could
running.
be agreeing with this. You know, there is a sense in which he might feel relief
As you are saying, it
for
might
being-
be a self-induced
for being
process.
rescued from his wife.
Yeah.
I mean, have you been a prisoner and somebody comes and says, are you released? They say, oh my God, for 10, 15 years, I couldn't even think.
It might sound awkward, but that's,
Yes, I mean, it's
possible.
It
Yeah.
is
Should
possible.
the SADC countries get worried?
Yes, we should
But
get
we are
worried,
part
and,
of SADC.
and slowly we have started to see the current chair of SADC, President Zuma, has sent emissaries, and he has spoken to President Robert Mugabe, because I can't say Robert Mugabe, I think he's still the president of
the
Zimbabwe. Comrade Mugabe,
Comrade-
he has
Comrade
spoken to
Robert
him,
Mugabe.
and we can see underground efforts are being done to make sure to make sure that they rescue Mugabe, they rescue Zimbabwe, but actually the kind of coup which has taken place in Zimbabwe is exceptional, because
Never
businesses are going on, people are boozing. Robert Mugabe is not complaining, but Grace Mugabe, I'm told, is in Windhoek now.
She has left the country. Okay, very quickly.
Yeah,
time.
okay. What I can say,
Some people have been arrested.
what I can say is that I think the Zimbabwe problem is homegrown. It is just emerged from within. It's not, to my thinking, it's not inspired from outside. Mugabe has overstayed, one thing. Secondly, he had been too much influenced by his own wife. And his wife is regarded as an outsider by those veterans, those who fought, for the independence.
Chimurenga 1 and Chimurenga 2.
She's also
Chimurenga, I don't know,
South African,
Chimurenga, something like that.
She was born in South Africa.
She's born in
She was in
South
South Africa. So he's an outsider in the sense of, that she did not fight for independence, but she's also a foreigner because she was born outside Zimbabwe.
But also Mugabe is a foreigner. He was born in Ghana.
Yeah, of
He's a
course.
Ghanaian.
Yeah.
Mugabe himself?
Yeah.
But he has
He's a
that
Ghanaian.
credential of having fought
I'm
for.
not so sure.
Robert himself.
Robert Mugabe is a Ghanaian. There is even a primary school he was teaching in Ghana.
No, but this
that
is
was
when he
before
ran away.
independence.
That's
He went
before
there.
independence, but he fought for
His
the
dad,
independence.
his dad is a Ghanaian.
Yeah, but what I was
Mugabe,
yeah.
Yes.
Let me
Just
check on
imagine,
that.
just imagine.
Let-
What
let's check
they
on
were
this,
trying to
please.
say, by overstaying, the people, some of the people, including his own people close to him, though they especially the veterans, have become tired of him, and especially the decisions he's making after becoming old, you see, and sacking even his own fellows. I remember, Professor Barego can help me here, the French Revolution, there was a man called Maximilien Robespierre.
Robespierre.
Yes, Perry. He created what he called the Paris Safety Committee,
Commune.
the commune. When he was running that commune, he killed many people. And when he had finished all those people outside there, he started looking within
The community.
the community itself. And when he killed the one who was thought to be the closest person, then the others became worried that otherwise we are going to be all killed. And they overthrew him and they killed him.
Okay.
So this is what is happening in Zimbabwe. He has reached that stage where even those people that the closest person to him are becoming worried of the decisions he is making. But the other danger we are making is we Africans, generally, we create these types of Mugabes that a person is not replaceable. We reach that point of saying, this man cannot be replaced. It is only this man who can do this and this and that. And that man becomes, builds that confidence that it is
We are
only
doing that
me.
right. We are doing that right now in this
Yeah,
country.
it is, we are doing that. It is only me who can do this. You see? And Mugabe did not think even the land, distribution cannot be done by anybody else except himself. He did not even trust his own fellow people who fought together. And therefore, he did not even build these institutions and create systems where he can get replacement after his retirement.
But there's one thing I'd like to amplify on what they were saying. I've argued this and I'll keep arguing. There is a very big mistake that we are making in Africa.
Yeah.
Let's build strong institutions.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, Trump is not the best president for
No.
America, but because there are strong institutions there, he can be kept in check. But for Zimbabwe, going forward, I think the war veterans won't be there forever. You know, that's the danger we have.
Yeah.
You know, we might solve this problem, but it will be short-lived.
Yeah.
Zimbabwe should look forward to making strong institutions that will come in place of the war veterans. The war veterans won't be there without the Tanzania Legion. We have problems with the Tanzania Legion, people that fought in the World War. And you have people that are young that fighting for Tanzania Legion land in Tabata. Did they fight did they fight? Yes.
Mnyanga, maybe I should add a little about the failures to create institutions.
Yes.
This country failed in bringing about a new constitution that
Yes.
was basically based on creating strong institutions.
So even for Zimbabwe, that is very pertinent.
It was
that
blocked.
if even the war veterans, they won't be there forever. So they need institutions going forward.
And Mugabe did not create any institutions for
He was
that
the
matter
institution.
because he believed he was the only person who could do that.
Thank
No,
you very much.
Mugabe
dear
was the
Kasaka.
institution.
I mean, this discussion can go on. This discussion can go on, but it was almost time is off now, but, gentlemen. I thank you very much for your contribution to both issues, particularly the Kenyan and the latest development in Zimbabwe. We have to have interest because Tanzania contributed to the liberation of Southern Africa. And we were talking about the Chimurenga 1, the Chimurenga 2. You know, this country was behind it. I mean, Mwalimu was in the forefront for it. So, somehow, I didn't hear from you, but I recall, I may be right or may be wrong, when Mwalimu visited Zimbabwe immediately after independence, he I'm told, I don't know where it is recorded or not, he told Mugabe, please, you have inherited a beautiful, strong, economic country. Don't mess around with it.
Don't mess around with
Right?
it.
So, Mugabe, after Nyerere left, I suppose if Nyerere was still around.
No, Mugabe was betrayed in certain areas. I
Yes,
mean, obviously, he made these agreements, the Lancaster House Agreement. The British had no intention to implement that agreement.
no, at all.
And then he wrote it in the new constitution.
Now, I thought I was going to sum up. But
Yeah, but what, there is one small thing.
That's it. That's it.
Then in fact, Mugabe should have learned from Nelson Mandela.
Yes.
President Nelson Mandela. In fact, he fought for almost throughout his life.
Yes.
And when he became president, he served only
Term.
single term, only one term.
Yeah, but
And he stepped down.
the jury is still out on Mandela. But anyway.
All right. Well, thank you very much, my panelists. Viewers, we heard the views of my panelists here on the Kenyan situation.
Okay.
We only hope that leaders in Kenya will tone down their language so that they sound more reconciliatory, and finally they should come together and resolve the problems in Kenya. There's only one Kenya, and Kenya is number one. The rest follow up. Well, let's hope that will happen. Regardless of what is going to be the outcome of the Supreme Court, if Kenyatta wins, then he should realize that he cannot rule a country which is divided, and he needs a unitary state. He needs the people who are together, inclusiveness. Well, as far as Zimbabwe is concerned, viewers, we heard again the views of my panelists here. They're very good panelists here. They have a lot of knowledge on Zimbabwe, but it has come, and maybe we didn't expect this to happen, but at the same time, my panelists are saying, well, it should have happened because this man had overstayed in power. He was almost going to be a permanent president for life. Unfortunately, because of old age, at 93, the pressure from the people around him, especially his wife, made it possible that the veterans, including the army and the others, thought, no, enough is enough. Let us
Rescue
this
him.
old man. Let us rescue the old man, put him in house arrest, and eventually the wife fled the country. Why did she flee the country? Well, we'll get to know as days go by. That's all we have for you today, viewers. On behalf of my panel, Balile, Njelo Kasaka, Professor Baregu, Joshua Mnyange, until next Sunday at the same time, and on Thursday for the repeat program. Thank you, viewers, and goodbye.